talking today about the work of Takashi Arai, and I'll just introduce him and our moderator, Dr. Simon Baker. So Takashi Arai has moved about 3 months ago to Berlin.
Yes.
But is otherwise from Kawasaki and Tono.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Tono
That's
is
right,
in
yeah.
the north of Japan.
Yes.
And I've actually been there. And I hope I'm going to pronounce it right. Daguerreotype. So I'm sure that the audience knows much more about it than me, but his work has been notable for use of this technique, which I'm sure he will talk about at some length. He's exhibited around the world, including Museum of Fine Arts Boston, Mori Art Museum in Tokyo, Staatliche Kunsthalle Karlsruhe, and the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. And his work is held in a number of these institutions as well. And otherwise, I'll let him tell you about the work. And I'm very pleased to have back with us Dr. Simon Baker. He's been our go-to man on photography and Japanese photography for some time, but then he went to Paris. So we haven't seen him for a little while. He is, since 2018, he's been the director of Maison Européenne de la Photographie. Sorry about my French. But before that, he was the head of the photography department at Tate. And before that, he was associate professor of art history at Nottingham University. And he's published widely about photography and history of art. So very pleased to have you back, Simon. And on that note, I will leave it to you guys.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And first of all, thank you for gathering today. And I am truly grateful to have an opportunity to present my artistic practice here with a kind invitation from Anglo-Japanese Foundation. And also, I'm utterly honored of being moderated by Dr. Simon Baker. Thank you so much. And my English is self-taught, and mostly from watching the movies. The movies like sci-fi films, for example, Star Trek. So I have to apologize in advance for my strange wording as a result of mimicking Star Trek captains. So, okay, let's begin. So I was born in 1978 in Kawasaki. And Kawasaki is so-called a monochrome city. It's nothing about photography. This is monochrome because of the pollution. So it is very famous for the notorious, gas emission from the factories, heavy industrial areas, and it's also famous for the very bad hip hop art sound scenes, etc. And also famous for Taro Okamoto. This is one of the things I can really proud of, the great artist Taro Okamoto. So I spent the whole childhood in this area, and I have never left my town or the metropolitan area in Japan. So I have never traveled to overseas even. So until the age of 19 years old. And if I look back my teenage years, I always find my one sustained feeling. This is the fear that the world may end soon. And how would the world end? To answer this question, we must clarify to whom the world ends. Let's discuss it later. Nevertheless, Japanese pop culture, literature, and art are heavily imbued with human apocalyptic imagination and have given a unique color to children's everyday lives. In the worlds represented in the manga or anime, world ends with often associated with one particular image. A mushroom cloud. However, the image, the mushroom cloud, symbolizing the Cold War and the atomic age, gradually began to disappear from Japanese pop and art scenes. So it always starts with this type of narrative. So the humankind get nuclear energy. From this moment, we doomed to die out, something like that. It's very serious, scary image. Coinciding with Japan's two bubble economies, the bubble of the 1980s and the IT bubble of the 1990s, the fear at the end of the Cold War faded, and the imagination towards the end of the world became old-fashioned. Japan may have entered to the age of the long amnesia at this point. As a college student in the late 90s, I too had forgotten all about the fears of my childhood, the final nuclear war and the end of the world. By the way, I started taking photography with this tiny Pentax. This is a keepsake of my grandfather. And this is the age of 17 years old in 1995. At that point, the keywords for the 1990 to 2000s photographic scenes in Japan are, for example, shishashin, it means private photography, or gallery photo. So gallery is gallery photo. This sounds very problematic. But juxtaposing with the strong remnants of photographic giants from the 50s to 90s, gallery photo, I think those who were responsible to this title have no idea about the implication of gallery and had no idea about long-lasting gender issues in Japanese photography. But anyway, the world of this gallery photo more had influential for my photographic career, because I did not enjoy the masculinity of the famous photographic giants like Daido Moriyama, Araki, or Nakahira Takuma. So I more like following the practice by the female photographers like Hiromix and so on, Rinko Kaoji and so on. However, there was the harsh moment that awakened the entire Japanese society and myself from the leisurely dream of amnesia. It was a day we will never forget, March 11th, 2011, the day the Great East Japan earthquake happened. The day after, March 12th, one footage shocked all Japanese and probably millions of people around the world. So this is the footage. When this soundless footage was shown on TV, I literally prepared for this. I felt as if my forgotten memories of the mushroom clouds I had always imagined in my childhood had suddenly resurrected in the real world. Three months before the disaster, on January 1st, 2011, I started one project, the project titled Daily Daguerreotype Project, taking a daguerreotype every day. Today, in the limited time of my speech, I won't go into the details of the techniques, but the daguerreotype is a photographic technique invented in the mid-19th century. The daguerreotype records the image directly on the mirror-polished silver surface. So I made this video for the presentation like today, like a short time presentation. So I made a whole one day, shrunk into the one minute. The image consists of nanoscale particles and has exceptional sharpness and resolution. The drawbacks are long exposure, the need for on-site preparations, and the inability to produce prints. And because of its chemical instability, my success rate is still lower than 70%, even after 20 years of my practice. So this is how to develop the daguerreotype. So you heat up the mercury, and image will be formed with the mercury and the silver particle on the surface of the plate. That's it. If you are interested, or if you check again, you can check the YouTube. So it's available for everyone. So this is a daily daguerreotype I took on March 11th, a few minutes after the earthquake happened in the nearby park in Kawasaki. For this series, I record the surrounding sounds from the moment I open the shutter to the moment I close it. The announcement you hear right now is the emergency broadcast after the earthquake. So this is a petri dish contains so-called death ash. This is a radioactive fallout collected from the Japanese deep-sea fishing boat, Daigo Fukushima, or Lucky Dragon 5, in 1954. Daigo Fukushima is a Japanese deep-sea tuna fishing boat that was exposed to the radiation from the United States hydrogen bomb test, Bravo shot, conducted on 1st of March, 1954 on Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. So left is the Lucky Dragon 5. It was abandoned once in Tokyo Bay, and it was kind of salvaged by the group of the people wanted to preserve this historical monument. So 21 crew members suffered acute radioactive sickness, and the radio person Aikichi Kuboyama died after a half year of suffering. This incident directly triggered the nationwide anti-nuclear movement in Japan. It was a mere coincidence that I daguerreotyped this ash on that day. But as the situation in Fukushima gradually became clearer, I began to have a peculiar but strong conviction that I was studying the daguerreotype to engage with such a subject. My first meeting with Matashichi Oishi, this is a portrait of Matashichi Oishi, a surviving crew member of Daiga Fukushima, just a few months before the earthquake, was probably another serendipity for me. The combination of the Fukushima disaster and the Lucky Dragon 5 incident was the beginning of my journey to nuclear issues. This is Here and There, Tomorrow's Islands series, the series of portraits of humans and non-humans in Fukushima. Human realities in Fukushima were first based on the information provided by authorities, until almost everyone started carrying Geiger counters. Locals were ordered to abandon their pets on their way to evacuate. Farmers had to let their livestock die of starvation. The invisibility of radioactivities became cliché and intentionally embedded in almost all narratives about Fukushima. The discourse of invisibility made people invisible, while others discussed the scientific facts or fakes and created division in politics. Those who were under the direct influence of nuclear contamination lost their voices and were treated in one word, hisaisha. That means disaster victims or disaster survivors. So they are the mother and daughter evacuated from Itate village, one of the most contaminated area in Fukushima. I met them at the mother's gathering, the gathering to share the daily feelings and anxiety without judgment. They were worried about frequent nose bleeding, which was often denied by others because there was no scientific proof. Here are deep divisions of narratives of individuals and authorities and methods. And while I'm traveling back and forth between Fukushima, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Kawasaki, I frequently visit the United States. As I studied nuclear history, I gradually understood that the United States and Japan have been dancing very strange atomic dance, hands in hand across the Pacific until today. This is the world's first nuclear reactor called Chicago Pile 1, built at the University of Chicago as a part of the Manhattan Project. By the way, uranium-type reactor, nuclear reactor, were originally designed as a plutonium production plants. The plant's vast amount of heat, that means electricity, was just a byproduct. The harmful side, where the plutonium was produced to make the atomic bomb dropped in Nagasaki, was temporarily knocked out of the power in 1954 when a balloon bomb sent by Japanese Empire made contact with electrical wire, was nearly caused the first nuclear disaster. I found this incident very symbolic. Japan and the United States, again, have been continuing strange nuclear dance since the beginning of the atomic age. Some of the results of my travels around Japan and the United States were collected in the book Monuments, published in 2015. This is a case of the book Monuments, with the traces of the journey plotted on the map inside. This is actually unfortunate to see it now. As you see, there's the void in between United States and Japan. That is the Pacific. Japanese were not only the victims of atomic bombing, but also the colonizers who invaded the countries in Asian Pacific region based on Japanese supremacism. In the void, there are the Japanese occupied Marshall Islands and the Chuuk Islands, where my grandfather, the lieutenant served for the Imperial Navy, was stationed. Last year, I had the privilege to visit the Marshall Islands for the first time, and I have just embarked on the project that bridges the traumata of Japanese colonization, United States nuclear colonization, and the climate change that the Marshall Islands are facing today. This project will likely also be a journey to my own grandfather and my ethnic identity and stigma. I often think that my work on the daguerreotype is too slow, and my lifetime is very short. This is probably clear that from my presentation that I have already tackled a subject that is beyond the capacity of one artist. How do we respond to the issues beyond our intellect, stamina, time, or imagination? My approaches are simple. First, think through the physical senses. Second, stay long in front of the subjects. Third, keep a stance as an individual, as much as possible. For those approaches, the daguerreotype plays an important role. The slowness and instability of the daguerreotype process does not allow me to make work that is apart from my physical senses. When I ask the model to stop for 10 seconds, I have no control over those 10 seconds. She or he may stand still, or he or she may walk away from the camera. That is their choice. The time of exposure, you may call it as a virtual death for 10 seconds, belongs to no one but the model. Like a midwife, a daguerreotypist helps at the birth of the image, but cannot interfere with the bond between the model and the image. The daguerreotype always asks me to collaborate with others, and it mitigates the asymmetrical relationship between the photographer and being photographed. This work was created with approach 2, staying long in front of the object. The object in this case is a historical monument, a salvaged hull of Lucky Dragon 5. This is quite a big one, like 1 meter by 3 meters work. So one grid is about 6 centimeters square, the same silver plate I use for daily daguerreotypes. This work took 2.5 months to complete. The most striking finding through this project is that the discovery of the surface of the monuments. The surface of object that we touch and see and are the interfaces that convey a great deal of information with our physical senses. The interface of monuments not only inspires individual memories, but also opens to the public and functions as the base of collective memories. This series aims to deconstruct the monument's meaning and political context and recapture the first encounter with the surfaces of the object. In recent years, it has been said that the Earth's geological age classification has entered the Anthropocene. In recent discussions, one human-made element is recognized as a marker for the Anthropocene. That element is plutonium. Humanity crossed the line on July 16, 1945, when a plutonium-type atomic bomb was detonated in Trinity site, New Mexico. This is quite timely. Did you see the film Oppenheimer? Probably. Yeah. So plutonium has half-life of 20,000 years. Plutonium, which has been produced every day at the nuclear power plants around the world, and other nuclear wastes must be stored in a safe place for at least 100,000 years until it rendered harmless. Despite the increasing number of the nuclear reactors, there is only one final repository site built in the world. That is Onkalo, which means cave, located in the Olkiluoto nuclear power plant in Finland. This is a series of the daguerreotypes, video, and found object created in 2022 in Onkalo, and a nature preserve southeast of the facility. Onkaro is designed and built to be maintained for 100,000 years, surviving through the next 4 ice ages. How can we warn humanity after 100,000 years about the dangers of the nuclear waste? Humanity has no ability to foresee such a deep future. After decommission, Onkaro is to be left without signs, warnings, and any trace of human activities that potentially attract the future generations' interest. 100,000 years from now, after several ice ages, an untouched forest will spread out. The project Forest After 100,000 Years has a somewhat entangled timeline. The future landscape will be preserved for our descendants in daguerreotypes that can last at least 200 years, and possibly longer. I often think about the time beyond my lifespan. Art is beginning to respond to the idea of the Anthropocene now. However, the sense of the Anthropocene, it sometimes contains the sense of the twilight of humanity associated with the term Anthropocene, gives me the sense of the fixed perspective based on linear history view. What is the value of the sentiments in the Anthropocene to the third world and the fourth worlds? What does it mean to non-humans? This is a portrait of farmers in Fukushima. They are burning winter dead grass in the rice field for the next year's fertilizer. This is a place actually prohibited to grow any kind of products because of the radioactive contamination. When I asked them why they were working if they could not grow any rice there, then they replied, "We are the house of the farmers for 7 generations. If we selfishly quit, we cannot look our ancestors in the face." So it was very striking words that I got from the farmers, and often similar narratives from the fisher persons as well. 7 generations is a time span about 200 years. Their sense of time and space is clearly different from city dwellers. They have been lived in a circulation of seasons and with circulations of plants and animals' life. Their sense of time is non-linear. The title of this event is borrowed from anthropologist Anna Chin's book, The Mushroom at the End of the World, obviously. And mushrooms thrive in the nature devastated by human activity and heal its wounds through a circular process in cooperation with the trees. I hope to use the daguerreotypes to create images that bring the non-linear sense of the time. The theme I'm currently working on regarding circular time is death and mourning. Why did humankind seek photography? The answer is simple: because we die. Before the invention of the daguerreotype in the 19th century, there was no way to carry out exact likeness into the future beyond our lifespan. Photography has been put to many uses in nearly 180 years, but its initial impulse is unchanged. Although it has become a vague background of the photography, you will know how obvious it is when you answer this question. If you can only take one photo in your life, what do you photograph? For the Tomorrow's History project, I interviewed Japanese teenagers for 1 hour or 2, and then took a single daguerreotype. The models were told that their daguerreotypes would last over 200 years, meaning that those photographs are for the generations yet to be seen. I didn't direct anything. I didn't suggest the poses. I didn't suggest the facial expressions. But interestingly, most of the models have a straight face, and very few of them smile. It is as if facial expressions are integrated during the long time travel to the future and revert to the very structure of the model's faces. For this project, the voices are essential because voices directly stimulate our physical sensations, which often trigger our emotional reactions, even if we do not know the language. All poses, hesitations, and laughter contain so much information that cannot be delivered only by visual image. I only play one voice here. This is very short statement after 1.5 hours interview. What she's saying that if there's no nuclear station, she was still at home. That is very simple, wording. But it's more importantly, she paused and she chuckled after saying something like that. So we can understand how complex, her emotion is. So this is not about the meaning of the words. It's more like how they speak, how she speaks, and how she feels at that moment. So now I am staying in the studio at the Kunstlerhaus Bethanien in Berlin. And there is the same chair where Susan Sontag sat, wrote, and read on photography in 1979. I was super surprised about this fact. But whenever I enter a studio, I remember Sontag's call for an individual person's resistance for the Palestinians. Today, tens of thousands of children are being killed in the conflict zones. If you cannot stand in solidarity, even on the absolute ground of life, dying and being born, perhaps our world, the world of civilization that advocates humanitarianism and humanism, on its signboard should be ended. Perhaps we can transcend our limited time and space and escape our linear time and rigid sense of history only by imagining the time after our death and by trying to hand something over to our posterity. I am thinking about what I can do and what I should do in a place where the Sontag was. One thing I have in my mind right now is to record the images of people who are systematically ignored and denied. Acts of imagining birth and death are connected to our visions to the future. Although I cannot go into the details at this preliminary research stage, my next project will likely be a return to the photographic testament, T's small case, of course, or the last note of the photography. Just please allow me to PR one thing. So my exhibition, Tono Forest Affair, will start next week on 26th of January at Paddy Hicks Gallery. I will show daguerreotypes created in Tono, in Tohoku, in northeast Japan. Tono is known as a birthplace of Japanese folklore. Many of Tono's folk tales are tales of death, reflecting the location of Tohoku region in Japan, associated with the memories of the colonization by the Yamato people and the dozens of famines from the Middle Age to mid-20th century. Today, those folktales, the non-linear worldview is once again attracting the attention in Japan, especially after experiencing mass deaths in the Great East Japan earthquake and the coronavirus pandemic. I hope you can come and escaping from the bustling London scenes and being entangled in non-linear time and space for a moment. Again, thank you so much for your attention, and thank you for having me here today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is an incredible presentation. So rich, so many ideas. I'll try to make a few questions to get into different parts of what you were saying. I want to come back to the politics and the history and the content afterwards. The first thing I wanted to ask you, because I was really interested, you showed the girly photo magazine,
Yeah.
And you said you were more interested in this kind of non-macho approach.
Yeah.
What I didn't really understand, which maybe you can say more about, is why that pushed you towards the daguerreotype. What was it? What was the connection between resisting, let's say the big men of the Japanese photo scene and going back to the daguerreotype?
Right. Yeah. At the beginning, when I started taking photos, actually, I was so much fond of Moriyama's writing, especially, and there's a Tatsuya, he's also like a great traveler and writer and photographer. So those words are so cool for me. And I got so much influence from them. And that is one of the reasons I started the backpacking to the Asian countries. So I got certain impact from those photo giants. But when I really start taking photos, I really started suffering with the tension with the models. So I mainly took the photos of the people. Yeah. Always I take photos, I make a distance of those people. I'm kind of hypersensitive person, so it was quite painful process for me. Then when I start studying the photography at the photo college in Tokyo, in Yokohama, then other students are very much following the Daido Moriyama or Nakahira Takuma's practices. And it was very bold and somehow mannish. Then I really couldn't find myself that I can do something more about this type of photography. Alebre, like out focus and also grainy photos. It was very popular in Japan at that time of the period. So I really wanted to find a little less invasive way, non-invasive way to cooperate with the models. So then it was just a curiosity that why I started making daguerreotype. Then slowly I found that the daguerreotype is less invasive than those snap shooting type of the photography.
When you say invasive, do you mean brutal? I mean quick, or what do you mean? I mean, because for me you said you were very sensitive. For me, the idea of staying still as a subject for a long time is more complicated.
Yes.
For the subject, for the sitter.
Yeah, I suddenly remember my writing about this. The moment I have to make the models stand still. It is. I also took it as a violent request for them. Yeah, so I wrote about it, and then I even wrote about I feel sorry for those models to take the living time away from them. Yeah, in that way it is of course a little invasive, but I slowly found that the models' reaction is not necessarily get invaded or something. So they more like feel like they work together with me to make one image. So it's more like if they
like an exchange. Or
exchange. Yeah, or yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's not connected, but maybe it is like we were talking a little bit before about your career and your age has the age you are. It's coincided with an explosion of dematerialized image making.
Right.
We could also say that Moriyama and Araki's generation, they were fascinated with the printed page as well as the print. So maybe for them, I know Moriyama made some great prints, but maybe that wasn't his biggest concern. So is there something about resisting this to drive you back to making? Because for those of you, I don't know if it was clear from the film, but a daguerreotype only makes one. It's not a negative. You can't have multiple. It's a unique object, very, very hard to make, and singular. And if we think about the last 20 years, we think about even our iPhones. One thing that has happened to photography is it's become multiple and everywhere and kind of dematerialized. And you're going back to something which is an object, very specifically.
Right. I think I can talk about several things about it, but if I narrow down to one, I think my first encounter with, for example, Moriyama's art is through the books. So it's great books. It's great in prints and quality-wise, and the black is so deep, and editing was genius. So I'm super impressed. And I went to the museum and look at the prints, and I don't want to use this word, but I was a little bit disappointed because this is different thing, book and prints exhibited in the museum space. So then I started thinking like the reproduction of the image. It's not something I have to consider if I continue taking photos. And I rather wanted to choose something I can escape from this question about reproduction, bookmaking.
Because it's even, I mean, again, for those people who don't know this, it's even really hard to reproduce in a book. Right. Daguerreotypes are very, very hard to reproduce.
Yes.
They never look anything like the object on the page.
Completely different, yes.
Yeah. So it's quite limiting yourself to a physical encounter for the viewer.
Yes, yeah. For me, my main topic is now like nuclear issues, not necessarily nuclear issues only, but more like collective memories and the individuals' narratives, etc. So it's all about memories. So the memories is very personal. So someone's memory, personal memory, it cannot be so easily be shared by others. So my focus is how I can bridge those two impossible individual memories somehow virtually through the visual image. So as a kind of device to bridge those two individual memories, I think the daguerreotype is very useful because of the quality of the image and floating on the surface of the mirror. So you really have to move your body to observe the image. So it is very interactive way to engage with the image. So it's more physical.
You just reminded me of, well, two things, but what you were mentioning, Moriyama's writing somewhere, I can't remember which text, but he talks about photography being like fossils.
Oh yeah.
Like, and there's another lovely image of like, like a bug, like a flies stuck in amber, something that's frozen.
Yes.
Frozen, like something from the long past.
Yes.
I think what the next thing I wanted to ask you is about this question of the past and looking backwards, because for most of us watching and listening to your talk, you sound like a very militant activist reporter who's going off to report on very, very critical issues, right? And the worst possible way you could report on something is to use a daguerreotype because it's going to take you ages. So you're developing a kind of way of constructing a view of your subject which builds in this like time element. I love the way you talked about time, because normally, there's been a lot of exhibitions about Fukushima and there will be more, 10 years on, 20 years on. Almost everybody who went to Fukushima took lots and lots of pictures quickly and made books and did projects, but you're looking backwards in a really different way, and I think it's really interesting.
That is a very interesting point, and actually I didn't think about it before. Yeah, this is maybe my narratives or wording is very military because of the Star Trek captains. I think, but I think I'm playing the game that I'm kind of trying to work as hard as possible, like documentary style photographers. But my media daguerreotype cannot allow me to work like them.
Yeah.
So it's very restricting my movement, restricting my ability to produce images.
Yeah, and you can't snap away. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't do a contact sheet and choose the best picture. You have.
Yeah. That selection is not about the daguerreotype. So it's more like you accept the image you take. It took one day. You accept or you deny this image. So it's not a selection. So it's very tough process.
Yes,
sometimes.
no.
Yes, no, yes.
Not like maybe.
There's no or, Yeah, so it's tough. Yeah, but yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is one of the things I really liked in your presentation, is you used the word monument for photographs.
Yeah.
I actually, a long time ago, I was working on the First World War and the destruction of northern France, and I found all these like postcards of destroyed towns, and I thought they were like monuments, like the postcards.
Yeah.
They were like a kind of monument you could take in your pocket. What does a monument mean to you? I mean, monuments have a weird, especially in this country, because they tend to be for things we're proud of.
Yeah.
They don't tend to be for things we're ashamed of. Although we should be ashamed of the pets in war monument or whatever it was. The animals in war is a very, very bad one.
Yeah.
But the sentiment is still positive. What does that mean to you? To make a monument of, is it about, it's not about celebrating something, it's about remembering, right?
Right. Monuments is actually a little bit confusing word because it contains so many different objects. For example, there could be the monuments that actually has a kind of scars of the bombings, or the monuments like just a cenotaph or I don't know, like a obelisk built after the original event. So those two objects are fundamentally different, for example. And also some monuments are built with a very strong political or political meaning. So for me, I want to focus on the monuments which has the trace of the original events or the trace of someone's memory or experiences. So in that that postcards that you mentioned is for me, I can call it as a micro monuments for individuals. And then I mean Germany, and I found that the German word for monuments is very interesting. It's called the Denkmal. My German is very awful, so I know just a few words.
Because nobody in Star Trek spoke German.
No,
that's probably why.
There's one German lieutenant, but she died early. Anyway, sorry, I'm too geeky about this. Stop here. What was German?
The Denkmal.
Denkmal, yes. Denkmal means to make thinking or something like that. So that object that make you think. So it's very different from the word monuments. So if the monuments is something that make the people think, so this has a function to make a influence to your recollection of the memories or the experiences individually.
There's a counter example, I guess, which I've immediately thought of, which is sometimes monuments are put to make people forget things.
Yes.
I live in Paris. In the Place de la Concorde was where the guillotine was. They put an Egyptian obelisk precisely to make people forget about the guillotine. So monuments can do both things. They can hide the past, or they can activate the past. I feel like what you're doing, because something that's really fascinating as well is you're showing us, like the watch, the 1102 watch from Nagasaki. That will make us think of Tomatsu. The famous cover of 1102 Nagasaki. Yes. The stopped clock, the stopped watch. You're going back to it even later, and it's adding another layer. So it's like history is not. You're not allowing history to settle.
Yeah, that is very interesting moment. I found that the wristwatch, because I didn't look for that particular wristwatch. The wristwatch was photographed by Thomas Shome. This story is actually written on the very great book Zelda Chattel wrote. It's sorry, what was the title?
The photograph that changed my life.
The photography changed my life, so highly recommend it. So anyway, so I found that the wristwatch when I was searching the stored monuments in Nagasaki Peace Memorial, and it was a full, kind of open source object you can actually rent freely. So one of the sets there is that wristwatch, and then I immediately realized, okay, this is Thomas Shome's wristwatch, and I called the Peace Memorial, and nobody knows about it. So I went there and checked, and I confirmed that it's Thomas's wristwatch. Then more interesting thing is that this 11-2 is at the time of the bombing. That hands of the wristwatch was drawn by someone. It's not the original hands. Yeah, so this is again very interesting that the function of the monuments. So the proper monuments has to have the proper coordination with the events and its service. So it is very human factor, I think. It can be anything, right? Like just a piece of the rock can be a monument, but it was not treated like that. So
I think didn't Tomatsu say? He wrote like there's only 2 times in Nagasaki. There's 1102 of that day, and there's everything since.
Yeah,
it's like a very powerful idea about time. And okay, last question from me, because then we have questions from the audience, I think. So be preparing your questions, ones that we know how to answer. And again, this is not a totally Star Trek question, but the idea of going forward, I think it's really interesting. You talked a lot about time and looking backwards and memory, but then this project that you're starting to work on, or have done a lot of work on already in Iceland or Finland? Finland.
Yeah.
It looks as if you're thinking forward, so like 100,000 years into the future, which made me, this is a fantastic idea. So thinking about this kind of, that time is moving in both directions. I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about that.
Yes. Daguerreotype itself is a very interesting object. If you look at the 19th century daguerreotypes, because the people photographed on daguerreotype, they all died already. But you can still know that the person existed in history. So with the help of the daguerreotype of any kind of photography, maybe we can, how can I say, do the time traveling.
It's like the idea of a time capsule.
Yes.
There used to be, I don't know, people of my age, they used to do that on children's TV programs. They'd bury a bunch of stuff underground or send it into space and say, this is for the future.
Yeah.
Which is a really weird idea.
Yeah, so I didn't mention it in my presentation, but I got a little very crazy idea that maybe I can take daguerreotype portraits of us, maybe humanity. I don't know what humanity means, but some people, group of people. Then store those portraits inside of that final repository site. So maybe the people after 100,000 years, they could find us. So this type of imagination is very interesting. Because like a deep future or a deep past, sometimes it's very similar.
But to me, in any case, that the daguerreotype implies all of this because of its kind of object status. Because you know how many of our iPhone pictures are going to be available 1 year away, never mind like 20 years away. Nobody keeps anything anymore. All the pictures go in. We think they're in a cloud. We don't know what the cloud is. We hope the cloud is real. We don't know what it is. Whereas a daguerreotype is this thing. Which is like a fossil. It's more like a fossil. Someone could find it.
Yeah, it has a chance to survive.
Yeah.
I think.